In this video, I'm going to be going through the idea of using a trace table to verify or to look at how well a process works that we're showing firstly in a flowchart. So on my left part of the screen, I have a flowchart. It has obviously the standard pieces. It has inputs and outputs. It has questions, processes, and so forth. And on my right, I have just a Word document with a basic table ready to go. The first thing I'm going to do is work out what items I need to keep track of in my table. Basically, what I'm looking for are inputs or outputs, processes that change or keep a value. So if I just work through my flowchart, obviously start is just a starting point. We then have an input of something called start number. So that's probably something we'll keep. So we'll put that in. And I do like to use the same wording and spelling, etc., as the example here. If we follow on, we also have an input of multiplier, so let's put that in. We then go down and we see that our start number is actually being stored in another variable called value, so let's also keep track of that. If we flow through, we see that our value is multiplied by the multiplier. We have both of those already in our table, but that is then stored in a new variable called product. So let's keep track of that as well. We come down, we are doing something to value, but we already have that being stored, so we don't need to add anything new to our table. Moving across, we are looking at the value of this variable called value. Again, we've already got that, so we don't need to add anything. Looping back takes us to somewhere we've been, so we don't need to go there again. And if we come across through this path, we'll see that we are outputting the start number and the product. Again, we already have both of those values being stored, and then it goes to stop. So really it looks like those four values are the ones that I'm going to need in this case. So I'm going to quickly remove this column that I don't in fact need. Okay, the idea now is to go through and work through the flowchart exactly as it's provided, keeping track of each of these values as they change or appear in the process. We don't have any additional information here about what our inputs should be, so I'm going to pick some numbers. So starting from the start point, the first thing I'm asked to do is to input a starting number, and let's pretend our input is the number 7. So I'm going to put that into the first line as the number 7, and I might just quickly change this to center those just because I think it will look a little bit better. And of course, because I've got it where is it? Styles, here we go. Because I've got it squashed up, I couldn't see my icon, but that's what I want. The second thing it then says is input the multiplier. So let's do a multiplier of 3. Okay, so we've got a start number of 7, multiplier of 3 so far. If we keep going down, the next thing that happens is the variable called value becomes equal to our starting number. So currently our starting number is 7, so our value variable also becomes 7. We now come through, and the next thing happening is our product variable becomes the becomes the answer of value multiplied by the multiplier. So currently our value is 7, our multiplier is 3, so our product becomes 21. We move down and we can see that our value becomes what it used to be, value minus 1. So we've already got a value here, so we can't just overwrite that, but 7 minus 1 would be 6. So we'll start that in the next line down because it's a change in this value. So we're keeping track of all the changes as they go. We move across in our flowchart and we see that it now asks, is the value equal to 0? Well, the most recent value of value, or value inside the variable value, is 6. Probably should use a better name for that actually. So no, it's not, so we loop back around. So now we are affecting product again. So product is now equal to the current value multiplied by a multiplier. Our multiplier has not changed, it's still 3, but our current value is 6. So 3 times 6 is 18, so that's going to become our newest product value. We now have to update the value inside that variable. So value currently is 6 minus 1, that now becomes 5. and we go across, checking is it equal to 0? No, it's not. So we're looping around again. And we're going to keep doing this loop. So if we keep going, I'll just put a few more lines in here. So the next thing we do is 5 times 3. That's going to give us 15. We're going to change our value, so that's going to go down by 1. And then we're going to say, no, it's not 0. So we loop around again. And we keep going. 4 times 3 will be 12. Reduce our value by 1. And then we're going to get back in the loop. So 3 times 3 is 9. We're going to reduce by 1. 2 times 3 is 6. And we're going to reduce by 1. And then we're going to have 1 times 3 being 3. Now when we come down, we reduce our value by 1. So our value variable becomes 0. So now when we come across and check, is value equal to 0? Yes, it is. So now we're breaking out of this loop and we're moving across to this point. And this is now saying we need to output the start number and the product. So if we have a look, our start number, in fact, never changed throughout this whole process. The only value we have recorded is the number 7. So our output down here is start number equals 7. And the product, if we have a look through, the product going down, the last product we had was the number 3. Okay, so technically our output is start number equaling 7 and product equaling 3. And if you were to give somebody this flowchart and the initial numbers, so the initial inputs here of 7 and 3, then you should be able to expect them to give you final answers of also 7 and 3. Now, in this particular case, it works out the same, but it won't always be that way. If you want to see more closely if they did it right, well, we have a look. What we're actually doing in this particular flowchart is we're just doing the multiplication table. So if we look at it, we've worked down or backwards through it. We've just ended up with the 3 times table. 3 times 1, 1 times 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, and so on. We've just ended up doing the first 7, our starting number, products or multiplications of 3. So we would expect to get the same input and output numbers at the end. But we could have also just as easily said what is the final value or anything else, and we should be able to see the same table to confirm that they got it right. Now what I did in my class is I basically exactly what I've just done in this video. I worked through with them, I gave them this flowchart. I then worked through, just like I did in this video, trying to work out what values should be stored in the table and then processed through it just like this so that we end up with our final result. I did talk in this particular case, because it is a fairly obvious pattern, that yes, you could just quickly fill these in and get the same result, or realize that you're going to end up with the same input and output values anyway. But basically that would just be cheating, and it's only cheating yourself, of course, because you're not learning a process, and not every flowchart is going to be so obvious. And finally, I talked about, then I got them to do their own version. So take exactly the same table, obviously blank it out, and then I asked them to do some different values. So in the case of my class, I asked them to do a starting number that was between 10 and 20, just to make the numbers a bit bigger, and a multiplier between 1 and 10. Now, obviously they can use a calculator. We're not here in this particular case to make them do mental math. They can use a calculator to do this if they need to. It's more about getting the process correct. And then finally, what they had to hand in to me was a copy of their table, which they've just done in Word. I asked them to do a screenshot of the flowchart and put it in, and then of course to make it presentable. So headings, name, student number, make everything look good, etc. Fill the page properly, and then they could submit that to me either through Schoolbox or some other method. At the most simplest level, I was able to come in and see, yep, it looks correct, it's got the right values, and they've completed the process. I then was going to get them to then do a guess the numbers. So if I quickly try and load in and bring across the guess the number flowchart that I made, let's see if I can get that to link in the screen a bit better. There we go. This is the guess the number with keeping track of high and low as well. This one will have a few more values in the table, and it's not going to be as obvious as the same values that you start with because the process is quite different. If need be, I'm happy to do a teacher video on this one, but that's what I was planning to give my students to check through and just go through the process. I was going to give them the actual table with the headings already and just ask them to go through the process. And it's also very easy because we can again give them a set of numbers. So basically what the number will be and the guesses will be. And again, we should see a certain set of values come out the other end. But as I said, I might do a second video working through that game basically in the same format. So hopefully this has helped you to understand this process and also to see how you can then use it in your class.